Okay,
Yeah.
so
So
take her away.
perfect. Thank you. So just looking at the screen here, obviously, oh,
Coming? It's coming?
that's
There we
okay.
go. Okay, we're good.
Perfect. I know most of you are coaches, and you're coaching either young athletes, adult athletes. But when you look at all of the pictures on the screen, these are the teams and the athletes that I think that we all want to emulate. You look at Team Hasselberg now that has done so much. They're our current Olympic champs. They've been together 5 years. Agnes and Anna together for 15, which is absolutely incredible given how young they are. Rachel and Emma have been curling together since they were Little Rocks. Mark and Brad and Jennifer and Jill for 23 years. And I think when you look at that, you can see, if you go to the next slide, Andrea, you know, they stayed together. And why have they stayed together? Are they successful because they stayed together, or did they stay together because they were successful? And I think it's probably a little bit of both. The reason why you see individuals or teams that are staying together, obviously they're like-minded, they have success, they enjoy each other's company. It's like anything else, like you're building a relationship, and any successful relationship, you still have your highs and lows and you still have your pitfalls, but it's working through those, and that just makes you a powerful force. If we can go to the next slide, Andrea. And this is a great quote, and I don't know if you're familiar with Herb Brooks, who coached the U.S. Olympic hockey team in 1980. I'm sure we were around in the 1980s, but I'm not looking for the best players. I'm looking for the right players, and that is so true. If you can think of certain examples where you try and put a team together, or even relationships, it's not always the most skilled players. It's the ones that have that same goal, have that same desire, that will put that effort in. I've always thought that I would rather have someone with a great personality, someone that has a great work ethic, someone that wants to work really, really hard at the game, and is constantly learning, accepts critiques and criticisms, rather than someone that's very, very skilled, that brings nothing else to the plate. Because you can always work on skills. It's very, very difficult to work on attitude and personality. With that being said, it's not impossible. It's just really difficult, because often, you know, what you see is what you get in personalities. And like I said, skills, we all know that you can work hard and you can develop players, but it's very, very difficult to change someone that's very closed-minded, that has a poor attitude, someone that isn't a team player. You know, thankfully, I've been very blessed to surround myself with coaches and also with teammates that fit that category. You know, they weren't always the best skilled, and we've had to really, really work hard on the game, on strategy and everything else, but they all had the best personalities, and that takes you a long way, because when you get out on the ice and it's a very stressful situation, and if the team dynamics aren't sound, that's when the cracks develop. And even with a very successful team, you could have some issues, but if you have very sound team dynamics, you can work through those issues, and you're going to become stronger because of it. So I love this quote from Mr. Brooks, that I'm not looking for the best players, but I'm looking for the right players, because that is just key when you're looking for a very successful team. Can we have the next slide, Andrea, please?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. So this just goes to show you, I've been around the block a long time, and like I mentioned before, I've had some success on the ice, but the most success that I've had, what I think are building these relationships. They're not only teammates, they're friends, but they're also family. And like I said, as I've mentioned before, we weren't always the most skilled teams. I had very, very skilled teams, but some that, you know, we really had to work hard at the game, but I've always surrounded myself with people that have had very positive attitudes, teammates that have been very coachable, which is huge, because when you're bringing a coach in, it's a different dynamic. I've also, you know, worked with teams that we've had a fifth player. That also brings in different dynamics. And I've also played where I haven't had a coach, and we've had to rely on 4 players to develop different roles. And like I said, you know, the teams that I've been on, it hasn't always been perfect. You know, when you're dealing with a lot of stress, and sometimes when, you know, things don't go your way and you suffer a really tough loss, you know, sometimes team debriefs can be, you know, very shocking, and things can get said. But I think as long as you're very respectful and you realize that you have the same goals and that you're all there for the same reason, that you come together as a team and you learn from that. I think it's the teams that maybe don't have that great base to start are the ones that don't survive past the year. But I've been very, very fortunate to surround myself with some really great people with some great attitudes. Next slide, Andrea, please. So building a team, what does that mean? And I know we've got some coaches of some U18 teams here, some coaches of some U20 teams. I don't know if anyone's coaching adults, but, you know, now we're looking at a time, hoping that curling starts in September, that you're already working on building a team. So if you don't have a team in place, that you're looking at putting together 4 or 5 people to start preparing to compete, hopefully in September, October. So let's talk about what it takes to build a team dynamics, ways to improve on team dynamics, and just going through some of my experiences as an athlete over the years, and even the last few years when I've started to coach. And by coaching, I'm coaching a U18 team as well as a U20 team. And, you know, I saw it from as an athlete, and now I'm starting to see it from a coach. So it's very interesting, and I look forward to hearing some of your thoughts as well. Next slide, please, Andrea. Perfect. So when you're developing a team and you get together with, say, four individuals, and you have your very first team meeting, and I know with COVID, probably the team meetings aren't in person. They will be through Zoom or through another app, which, you know, has its challenges too. But I know with both the teams that I'm coaching, we've already had a couple meetings now, and we're starting to talk about, you know, what could happen in September, and starting to talk about training and working on some fitness plans. And so the first thing that you want to do, and crucial things for team development, is setting up team and individual goals. And this sounds like, yeah, everyone does this. Everyone has a goal, and, you know, everyone wants to win. You want to win provincials and get to nationals and build towards this and that. And that being said, yeah, that's a great team goal, but you also need to set up individual goals and performance goals and technical goals, practice goals, goals about being a good teammate, communication goals. So when we talk about goals, it's not just about performance goals and winning it all. It's got to be a ladder, and the steps of the ladder to get you to the top. And it's very important. And, you know, I don't know if we can all relate, but certainly when you first get together, say in your first few meetings, and when you talk about goals and maybe commitments, and you can already tell if everyone's on the same page, or maybe there's going to be a few issues. You know, if you have someone that's totally off the wall, that has a totally different goal than the other 3, you may want to, you know, discuss that right then and there, because if you don't nip it, nip it in the bud, it's going to continue on. So it's very important that you get 4 or 5 individuals as well as a coach that have the same goals. You certainly don't want someone that's, on the Olympic train that wants to do everything. They want to go in all these bond skills and they want to do this and that, and then you have an individual that's just there to make friends. Then that is not going to be a successful season. It's going to be hard. A lot of this is just it's basic but it's very important. The same as you need to establish commitment. What is the standard of the team with the commitment? How many bond fields are you going to do? How many practices? The same as like setting up a schedule. I know, kids are usually so gung-ho that they want to play in everything. But, as a coach, we need to say to them, maybe you do 2 bond fields a month, but you also do a practice weekend. The same with training. You need to set out standards and the responsibilities and what is expected. And I think it's also important when you have these initial meetings that you say it's okay to speak up and say someone is going to first-year university, that they may not have the time that they can commit as opposed to, say, maybe another teammate. And that's okay, but it's something that, if you have that open and honest communication that you see a little bit farther down, that is very important to speak up before that you get too far into the season and someone gets very stressed out saying that they just can't commit to that schedule or that practice because they're falling behind in school, or they just, they can't do everything. So they end up doing it kind of half instead of doing the best that they can. So it's very, very important that you establish that open and honest communication so that they feel that they can speak up and say when things aren't going well. And I think that's the best thing that you can do so that they'll have that trust and that respect so that they feel like they can talk about things before things get too out of hand. What is huge is establishing roles and responsibilities right off the bat. And even, not necessarily for the coach, but also for the teammates and also for parents. Usually if you have like a U18 team, the parents will be at the meeting. And I think it's very important that you establish specific roles and responsibilities for the parents as well. Maybe have one of them involved with managing and sending in entries and managing the finances of the team. You can maybe have another parent that is in charge of social media, maybe another parent in charge of accommodations. The fact that they feel like they're contributing keeps them busy, and then you can make sure as a coach that you're in charge of establishing roles on the team. The fact that when roles get set out as well, and this could be roles of positions on the team, and it's very important that everyone understands their role, they're comfortable with their role, and they're willing to work hard at that role. So if you have the positions in place and you have, a skip who is a very capable skip, they're a leader, and you have someone that is a lead but used to skip, you want to make sure that that new lead is comfortable in that role, and they're going to work hard at their role, and they're not going to want to skip or won't support their skip because they're not happy in their position as a lead. So it's very important that those roles are clear, they're established, and everyone is happy with those roles, and so that you can build towards success.
We have a question, Sherry.
Sure. Yeah.
Accountability. So along with responsibility, what's your experience as far as establishing accountability within the team?
And that's a huge point. And it's so hard because with commitment levels and everyone varying commitment levels, I think it's important that part of that is trusting that your teammates will do what they said. I know in past teams, for accountability, to make sure that, say, someone is doing training, if they're doing working out, that you can do testing. So you can do testing, 3 times a week. You can have a spreadsheet, and people can put in on the spreadsheet what they've done. I know a past team that I've had, whenever we went to practices, and we had individual practices, we Snapchatted going to the rink, or we were doing different drills on the ice, and we would take a picture of our drill, so that our teammates were satisfied with what we were doing practice-wise, training-wise, because we all have to be accountable, so that we trust that our teammates are living up to their responsibilities and living up to their commitments. That being said, too, you don't want one teammate kind of tallying up and saying, you know what, I went out and I practiced 3 times this week, and one of my teammates only practiced once. Well, maybe that teammate had projects and exams, and that's why they couldn't get out on the ice 3 times a week. So I think even though it's accountable, I think if you trust and you respect your teammates, then it's okay that, say, a teammate couldn't get out and practice as much as they said they would. But also, that being said, too, if they didn't get out and practice, I still expect them to perform at that next event. And if they don't perform, then it's because they weren't out practicing, and then maybe they need to look at better time management for school so that they can get on the ice practicing. So hopefully that answered your question about accountability, because I think it is important that we're all accountable and that we do what we set out as a base level for commitment. And that way, then there's no hard feelings, and there's no teammates saying, you know what, you're not lifting your end. And I've been in situations like that too, where, if you have teammates that, you'll get this with older athletes. If you have teammates that have jobs, or you have teammates that have small families, we all have to be respectful that they're taking on a lot. And maybe if you've got a young athlete that has all the time in the world to practice, of course they're going to practice a lot more than, say, someone that's got a full academic load. We just have to trust and respect that they're going to do what they can, and if they can't, then we need to sit down and we have to have a meeting and maybe reestablish commitment levels and talk about that. So yes, accountability is huge, because we want to believe that our teammates are living up to what we set out as a commitment level.
Excellent.
Okay. Any other questions?
Not so far.
Okay, perfect. So I am a huge proponent of routines. And you'll notice farther on down in competition. I think it's very important with whatever you talk about with communication, that communication is always, that everything gets talked about, commitment level, training, responsibilities, but also in competition. And when you're talking about things and everything is communicated, then I don't think there's any huge surprises either. So that when you say, at the start of the year, we talked about that we were going to go into 2 bonds fields, we were going to have, 4 training weekends, we were going to commit to this and this and this. And if everyone is aware of these things, then there's not going to be any huge surprises. So by keeping that communication open, that dialogue is always there, and then there's no surprises. The same goes for competition. And like I said, I'm a huge proponent of routines. And right from the very start, I think when you're talking to athletes, especially young athletes, they tend to like things done for them. And I think as a coach, very true, and I'm finding that with my kids as well. So the more that we can set something up, saying, okay, arriving at the game an hour before, we're going to, as soon as you get there, you're going to get changed. We're going to sit down and we're going to have a team meeting. We're going to warm up for 20 minutes. We're going to do this and this and this. I think the more that you have laid out for the athletes, they're going to be more successful because they're going to know exactly what is required of them. The same with as soon as you get off the ice, we meet as a team, we have our debrief, then you can talk to your family, go down and change, then we go out to eat. So when you're establishing routines, the more that you can talk about this is exactly what's expected, then the athletes can perform on the ice. Next slide, Andrea.
Whoops. It won't let me go. There we go. Okay.
Perfect. So team dynamics. We all know that team dynamics are absolutely huge, and they're important. But what is team dynamics? Team dynamics isn't something that is just automatic, and they take a lot of time and they build. And I can pretty much guarantee you that even if a team is together for 5 years, they're still working on team dynamics. One of the things that one of my teams that I was with for 8 years, one of the things we did in August is we had a training weekend. So we would spend Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday together. Probably about 30% of the time was spent on ice. The other 70% of time was spent on team dynamics and communication and just going over, okay, what do we need to do to be successful? So even though our team had been together for years and years, we still realized the importance of team dynamics, and you never take that for granted. So I can pretty much guarantee you that when teams are getting ready for September, team dynamics are number one on the list that they talk about. Because when you talk about team dynamics, you're talking about building a right from the ground up, building something that is very strong, that you know that even under the most stressful of conditions, those team dynamics will be there and you can always count on them. So understanding what each other needs. So what makes each other tick. So when you talk about as a teammate, so so-and-so, what happens if you miss this shot? Do you want someone to come up to you and pat you on the back and say, oh, that's okay, you'll get it next time? Do you like to be left alone? Do you like information? You threw it well, but, that rock did something that we didn't expect. So when you talk about team dynamics, that's what it is just understanding personalities, that we're all very different, and that you respect that we are very different. Some people might be morning people. Some people might not be morning people. Some people might get very stressed and not like to eat before the game, and that's fine too. So it's realizing that we're all individuals, we're all very different, and respecting that, but realizing that we still need to come together as a unit to be the strongest team possible. And again, we're talking about open and honest communication, because that's huge. Having mutual respect and compromising. I was on a team that, some of us liked to go to certain bonspiels and others didn't. So we compromised. We said, maybe we have to do this and this to make each other happy. But we respect each other, and we support each other in action and words. Friendship, cohesion, that's very important as well. And creating experiences and creating memories And all of this goes to building on team dynamics. And like I mentioned, with one of the teams, we like to start off with our training weekend. And that just got us ready to when we stepped on the ice, we were all ready to go. And I think that's huge too, that you're building memories. My daughter's team last year, they were a brand new team. They got together and they had a bonding weekend in the summer. They went to Halifax and they got to know each other. They worked on things, and that was something that just made them a very strong team right off the bat. Other things that you can do is you can, for team dynamics, is you can take different personality tests. You can find that maybe someone's a leader, someone's a follower, someone, needs a little bit more support. Other people, they get very, very tense, and they shut down in very stressful situations. What can we do as a teammate to build them up and get them communicating again? So all these things take time, and often, when you put a team together, you don't see things immediately. So I think that when you see little chinks in the armor, that you can discuss things and just say, what do we need to do to become a better, stronger team? So understanding each other and what each other needs is huge. And often when you ask a player, when you miss a shot, what you want to hear from a teammate, and often they think they know, or they might say they just want to be left alone. But that's not beneficial either, because then they can go into their little shell. They need to communicate. They need to understand that their team is just supporting them. Next slide, Andrea, please.
Yep.
So one of these things that we're creating memories. These are things that Perry Marshall's in China right now. My team went to China, and we went there for a bonspiel, but we created memories, and these are part of the things that built on our team dynamics. We went to the Great Wall. We were very successful in the bonspiel. Next slide, Andrea.
We just had a question. Sherry,
Sure.
Are there any personality tests that you've experienced that you thought were maybe better, one was better than some of the others?
Well, some of them that we did were just basically questions that you answered that were very truthful, as what kind of a personality were you? Are you more of a leader, a type A personality? So I don't know any personality tests. It was more like we had coaches that created tests for us, basically saying, do you like to, so they weren't necessarily personality. It was more like, in a perfect scenario, how do you like to be treated? Are you more of a cheerleader? Are you a leader? Are you someone that just likes to go with the flow? What kind of communication do you like before and after the game? So it was more not necessarily personality tests, but more like opening up the lines of communication so that you got to know your teammates a little bit better. One of the big things that I remember doing a little practice or an assignment that I had with one of my coaches is that we wrote down what we liked about our teammates. And each teammate gave it to and I still have mine in my curling bag. And I remember what my teammates liked best about me. So I think for not necessarily a personality test, but it was just using communication so that you were getting to know your teammates a little bit better.
Okay, great. And I think that's critical as well. It's knowing each other's style of communication, so that somebody that shoots from the lip, and maybe there's somebody who is a little more likes to process before they deliver a hard message, kind of thing. So that's really important to the crew. There's the Myers-Briggs, there's the Hartman, and then somebody just mentioned in the chat box the Big Five. I've been through the Hartman, and I think I've been through the Myers-Briggs, but the tests are out there. If you Google, you'll find some good ones. It's just also recognizing that it's only as good as the information provided, is only as good as the people that have completed the questionnaires and the tests. But establishing for yourself ways of drawing that information out of your players is just what Sherry said. That's it exactly. Next slide.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. So, does anyone recognize the gentleman in the top right-hand corner?
Isn't he between the sheets or something like that?
Pardon me?
Isn't he between the sheets or something like that?
Yeah. So when we went to Japan, we went with Ben Hebert. And these are just things that I think it's important that we create memories for our athletes. Unfortunately, I have a lot of regrets on the ice for shots that got missed, strategy mistakes, games that we let slip away. We can't always win 100% of our games, but so I have regrets on the ice. I don't have any regrets off the ice, and that's because I surrounded myself with fantastic people. That we built such great relationships. So that was I just wanted to show you some memories that I have. Next slide. So team bonding. You can do some team bonding that can build team communication without them even realizing it. And this goes a long way to build team dynamics as well. So one thing I mentioned, I had teams that we love to do a preseason training weekend that also was on ice as well as off ice. I think this generation is much more proficient at social media. So even though we're in this COVID thing and we're not quite understanding these Zoom meetings and Instagram and Messenger, the kids nowadays, this is secondhand to them. So they're already doing team dynamics. They're already in group chats and doing things much more than I know I used to do with teams. That I remember we used to think that we needed an in-person meeting. And unfortunately, that isn't the case right now, is we're having to do a lot of team dynamics and meetings over Zoom or whatever apps are out there. But that is part of, building a team as well. I know my daughter has been doing game nights every Saturday night. They've been doing online Jeopardy, online Family Feud, things like that. So I know with her team right now, they're already doing some team bonding and getting ready for the season. Hopefully COVID will be over soon, and we can start doing things like escape rooms and axe throwing and things that we can do to create some team unity to get them ready for the season. What do teams like to do in between curling games to bond? I've been on teams that we've played cards, or we do dice, or you play games on your phone like Heads Up, just to get ready for games. But also with team bonding, and this is part of team dynamics, is knowing your teammates. And we don't always have to do everything together. Some people may, between curling games, they may need to eat and then have a nap. Or some people, you might have teammates that need to do homework. So realizing that we're not always the same, and we don't always every single teammate have to do everything together. and respect that. And you'll find that even you have a team of 4, you're still going to have cliques. You maybe have 2 teammates that get along really well. I always find that for whatever reason, when you're rooming together and you have 2 hotel rooms, for some reason it's always the back end that stays together and the front end that stays together. And I think it's just because, that's the dynamics of your teammates is, the front end, they're the workhorses. So, they may talk about communication and timing and sweeping and whatever, and the back end, they like to room together so they can talk about strategy or whatever. It's just, even within the group of 4, you're still going to have cliques. So be respectful and respect each other's differences so that you're not always all 4 of you having to do exactly the same thing. You may have a couple teammates that like to do one thing and 2 that don't, and that's okay. That's not a big deal. But I know with team bonding, to me it's all about having fun and creating those memories, and a team that has fun together, and that just means that they're going to have better communication. They'll feel like they can open up and trust each other. They have that chemistry, that unity, and the more that a team can bond, I just find that they're going to be a stronger team. That their teamwork and their cohesion is a lot stronger. I know I've never had any issues with team bonding. That we've always seemed to, because you enjoy each other's company. And the great thing about curling as well is, I love it when I see kids sitting together with other teams. And to me, that's what the sport is all about as well. It just might not be just your team, but you're communicating and you're building a bond between other teams. And to me, that's a huge part of the sport too, because those are the memories that the kids will remember, and also why they'll stay in the game. And to me, the big part is the longevity. It may not be the longevity of a team, but if we can keep kids involved and stay in the sport, to me that's huge and part of the sport. Anything else, Andrea?
No questions so far. Great. Next slide.
I think so, yes.
Okay. Oh, my keyboard doesn't want to work, but my cursor does. Oh, lovely.
And this is what Andrea sent to me, and it's such a great quote. The way a team plays as a whole determines its success. You may have the greatest bunch of individual stars in the world, but if they don't play together, the club won't be worth a dime. And that is so true. Even though a team is made up as individuals, we need to work together to have success. I look at one of the teams Team Canada, Team Aronson from last year, and you look at everyone was saying, how is a team of 4 skips going to work together? And they found a way. And so I'm sure their meeting at the start of the year, they talked about roles and responsibilities. And you know what? They took it upon themselves to 4 skips are now a skip, a vice, a second, and a lead. And they had to redefine their own skill set and their own role on the team. And I think a lot of people thought that team wouldn't do very well, that, if Carrie Aronson had a tough game, then maybe Val Sweeting would say, you know what, maybe I should be skipping. But, they worked very, very hard at establishing their new roles on the team, and they put it together and built success and became Team Canada. And I think that just goes to show how determined those 4 individuals are and how hard that they work towards that common goal. And, whether, they set aside some egos because, skips are a very individual bunch, but they worked hard at establishing their new role, and it worked for them. So I think you may have greatest bunch of individual stars in the world, but they showed what it took to make a great team. And to me, that's exactly when Andrea sent me this quote, I thought of Team Aronson, because they were like, 4 skips that came together and redefined their own roles, and they made it work, and they became Team Canada.
Exactly.
So I mean, that I think you come apart and you say, well, you know what, there's a lot of skilled players out there, and there's a lot of interesting personalities, and it's trying to find those 4 individuals that can come together, support each other in good and in bad, and become successful. I know I was coaching my daughter's U18 team last year, and from previous teams, they all had a little bit of drama, and they all had different issues with personalities and all that. So their goal, they formed their own team, they formed their own unit. Their goal was to have a drama-free season, and they had some success on the ice. They didn't reach their goals of getting to provincials, but they were happy. You wouldn't have known that they didn't make provincials because they actually had new friendships. They created a whole bunch of memories, and they had a blast the whole season. So you know what? It's not always winning. It's creating those memories and creating those friendships.
Sherry, have you ever had a situation where there's kind of the elephant in the living room on a team, where you know that you can feel that something is amiss, but nobody has voiced yet what it is or how it can be addressed? Have you had a situation like that, and how did you deal with it?
Yeah, that's a great point, and I did. I was on a team for 4 years, and we were quite successful, but there was always, and I always say, we had one player that didn't quite fit, and it was one of those that very, very skilled, but just a very different personality. I'd say that we had. She was a square peg trying to fit into a round hole. And we knew that. But our coach at the time did a really, really good job of juggling her personality. And we made it work, like I said, for 3 or 4 years. But it was just a matter of time, that white elephant in the room. You know what? You can work and work and work, and sometimes it just doesn't work. But I think, when you get together for, that initial team meeting, and if you have a feeling that, something just isn't quite right, it's not going to get better. So as a coach, you need to nip that in the bud and, either talk about it as a team or talk to that individual and just say, like, this is what I'm seeing. Is it really the case? I also, with my daughter's team that I coached last year, we had one teammate that was not quite as committed. But you know what, with a little bit of talk and just saying, we feel like you're not putting in the time for practicing, she eventually did come around. But it was a matter of, these things have to be talked about. You just can't get disgruntled and think it's going to get better. And that's just a part of the open communication, and being respectful too and just saying, like, this is the expectation and you're not meeting those expectations. So this is what you need to do to be part of the team. And you know what? And it worked out once we raised the situation. And we also found out that she was letting a few projects slide too, so we had to talk about team management or time management. And and once we talked about that, then it got better. Because it's always the way is you need to talk about things. You need to talk about issues because they do not get better on their own. And I think the more you communicate, the more that you respect and understand, then hopefully there won't be as many elephants in the room.
Mm-hmm. It really does turn what are perceived weaknesses into strengths.
Yeah.
By communicating and talking about it.
Right, and I think a big part of it too is, I also had another experience too, is when, in putting together a team, and we had different commitment levels, and we just said, okay, this is what we're able to commit to. We've got some players that have young families, so we have to respect that. And again, to me, you do whatever you need to do to put your best performance on the ice. If you need to play 3 league games and practice twice a week in order for you to play really well, then that's what you need to do. There's some other athletes that are very talented that may need to do less, but they can still put that performance on the ice. So, even though I expect something from myself, my work ethic doesn't necessarily, this is what I expect from a teammate, as long as they can perform. But if they're not performing, then what are they going to do to get that performance back up to a level that it needs to be at?
Okay, we have a question. This coach sent out a gap analysis document to his team with a deadline to send it back within a few days. 2 sent them back right away, but the other 2 have not. It's a U16 team. How, as a coach on this new team, do I get the other 2 to meet my deadlines? In our first team meeting, all the players said that they were all committed. How should I approach this with the parents? That's a good question.
It is a good question. First of all, I would not go to the parent. I would go to the athlete first. And just say, is there a reason why you haven't sent in the gap analysis? Are you not quite understanding what is required from the gap analysis? Maybe they have a good reason why it's not done. And then explain, I need it in by, such and such a date, and we do have deadlines, and this was the date, and please don't let it happen again. But I don't think I would go to the parent. You have to be respectful of the individual, and they're 16. So you shouldn't be going to the parent, but you should be going to the player themselves and just saying, and maybe it was a point of maybe they didn't quite understand what was required out of them, but that was their one chance, and from now on the deadlines need to be met.
Oh, and as a U16 team, this coach doesn't have access to their personal emails yet. That's a good.
Right. Yeah. And I guess that's the way it is too, right? U16. So I guess you would have to involve the parents, but or maybe the parent could pass on that the child can contact, because I don't think you necessarily want to be going through the parent every single time you need to talk to the child, but unfortunately that's the day and age that we're living in right now too. But you need to establish a level of communication with the player, I guess.
Yeah, whether it's by text or cell phone or
exactly.
Yeah, and I think with this generation, and I could be wrong on this, but it's just my observation that sometimes they respond more quickly to a text, whereas with a telephone call, they on their cell phone they can kind of ignore it. At least that's what my daughter does.
No, that's true. Yeah. Or yeah. I find that the kids nowadays, they seem to do communication like through Instagram or through Messenger, and you can establish a group chat as well. and then just say, you know what, I've received so-and-so's gap analysis, but I haven't received the other two. And then all of a sudden now they're accountable. Their teammates know that, you know, there's two that are pulling the line, but two that aren't. So then establish a group chat.
Yep. And the other thing I think we need to remember too is the rule of two is so important right now. You know, when a coach has to talk to a player and bring up something that is within the team and maybe just between the coach and that player, that there needs to be somebody else, at least at one end of the conversation, to hear what's going on in order to protect the coach.
Yeah.
So that's a tough situation as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think
it's a brand new world.
It is. It certainly is. One thing that I've always noticed, and I think you've seen this too, Sherry, is if there is a team dynamics issue, you may sail through the first few competitions where there isn't a lot of pressure, but the highest level of competition that you get to, if you haven't talked about whatever the issue is facing the team, that's where it's going to manifest itself and may really impact performance. Have you had that experience?
Yeah, you know, or something that didn't used to bug you before all of a sudden becomes a huge issue.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I remember too is I had a teammate that, you know, we would say, okay, we want to leave for the game, leave the hotel at such and such a time. All of us would be in the van, and then this one person would be constantly 10 minutes late. And, you know, it's just, okay, you let it slide, but then it just grates on you after a while. And, you know, this person didn't quite understand that it bothered us, but it did. Like, your time, you know, we set a time to meet in the van. This is when we need to leave, and you're constantly 10 minutes late. You know, why? Is your time more valuable than ours?
Mm-hmm.
And just things like that, you know, like you said, you know, some days it wouldn't bother you, but all of a sudden you're going to a big game and you're a little stressed and the nerves are on edge, and then, you know, you might say something that, you know, you don't mean to say, that it gets taken a little out of context. But, you know, it's tough, but I think you always want to treat a teammate as how you want to be treated. So communication should be done with respect, and realizing that, you know, if I speak to you in such a manner, in a manner, is that going to be productive, or is it not going to be productive? And I think as long as you can establish those lines of communication, and to me that gets done right from the very start. And if you're respectful to people and empathetic, and just, you know, establish a good relationship, that when you do come upon those things that may be a few cracks in team dynamics, if there's a good base, then you can build on that and you can get through it just with some communication. And like I think I mentioned before, that, you know, if you, right from the get-go, if you feel like there's going to be some issues, you need to talk about that right off the bat. Like, if you feel like there's going to be some a player that maybe is slacking commitment, or their goals aren't quite the same, then you need to talk about that right from the start, because it's not going to get better.
Right. Yeah. I think this was the last slide, was it not? Yes.
It was, yeah.
So are there any questions? This has been really, really helpful, Sherry, very helpful. Any other questions from anybody? If you want to open up your mics now, you can. And ask away. We've got one of the best female curlers in all of Canadian curling history, so let's use her. Oh, we have a comment here. Oh, thank you, Sherry, from somebody, from Rob Patterson. Patterson? Okay, well, no other questions then. We'll end on time. I will send the recording out along with the slide deck. I know I sent it to all of you earlier, but just to make sure that everybody gets it. Sherry, if people have questions, are you okay if they contact you by email with any questions after they've had a chance to think about things?
Yeah.
Okay.
By all means, forward my email out, and I look forward to hearing from everyone. And I just want to say that I love the sport so much. I'm so passionate about it, and it's given me so much. But I would much rather draw the forfeit than having to talk about it. So,
awesome.
The forfeit any day. But
excellent. Good. Okay. So as with all of our webinars, please use this for your own use. Don't share it unless you have permission from Sherry to do that. People are all saying thank you. Thanks, Sherry. Great topic. So I'm going to stop the recording